Very good evening, friends. Meeting again in the session of Kant's philosophy, and we are discussing the chapter number 17, that is from the fourth year syllabus. And here, J.T. Kent has tried to explain the practical part of Organon. He starts right from the aphorism number 71 onwards, the science and the art. In this chapter specifically, he has discussed two aphorisms, the 71 aphorism as well as 72 aphorism. We were discussing the part of 71 aphorism, and there Hahnemann put three important questions. What you are going to learn in this practical part of Organon? It has been divided into three different parts. The first question which he has raised is related with the knowledge of diseases in general and knowledge of disease in particular from the patient. This specifically leads toward the aphorism number 72 to 104. From 105 to 145 deals with the second question, that is, in order to treat such disorders, the weapons which are there in homeopaths with homeopaths are the drugs or homeopathic medicine. How those drugs are proved, how the qualities of those drugs are known, all the methods, including how the drug prover should be, how the person who is conducting the drug proving should be, everything, the do's and don'ts, all have been discussed over there. So that was second question. And third question, how to apply this knowledge of medicines to the knowledge of diseases. Most practical part of the Organon starts right from aphorism number 145 onwards to 290. So he has started with this, and in this specific chapter, he deals with the two aphorisms, 71 and 72. In the 72, he starts with the classification of diseases. Basically, classification of diseases are divided into two types, the adynamic disorders and dynamic disorders. Adynamic disorders are the disorders where cause is external to the body. It is not because of something dynamic which affects, but it is something, some material affects the human life externally, and because of which person is deceased. So poisonings, the accidents, all those comes under the sphere of this specific adynamic disorders. And in the dynamic disorders, they are again divided into two types. These are the disorders which are caused because of internal cause, internal derangement of items. And they are divided into two types, the acute and chronic. The definition of acute is partly given in aphorism number 72 and partly in 73. And these are the diseases where there is a period of prodrome, there is period of progress, and period of decline. And in case of chronic, there is a period of prodrome and progress, but no decline. So this is the difference between the acute diseases and chronic diseases, which he has highlighted. Then acute diseases are again divided into four types: the individual, the sporadic, the epidemic, and endemic. Out of which first two deals with the susceptibility of human being, and latter two are very specifically caused because of acute miasms. And acute miasm, in acute miasmatic diseases, there is always a period of prodrome, progress, and decline. So this part we were discussing, and we were there on page number 143 in my book, that and last paragraph which we have to start. This is the concluding part of this chapter. There are some conditions of chronic disease which closely resemble acute diseases. For instance, these mimicking acute attacks that come on regularly as a periodical headaches. One attack singled out might have the appearance of an acute miasm, yet the tendency to progress and not to recovery shows that it belongs to the chronic class. Those disorders that comes from debauchery. Debauchery means doing something wrong in life, either drinking alcohol or some other, having a drug addiction or smoking or going towards the prostitutes. Debauchery and drinking and overeating from immediate circumstances that are periodical are things that arise from the latent soric condition. They are momentary sickness, and if were not for the fact that man suffers from chronic miasms, he would not have these. These attacks would not from a sickness, would not have an appearance of acute sickness. It is due to the chronic miasms that man has these little recurring attacks. These do not come with a prodromal period, a progressive period, and period of decline. They have an attack and decline, but no prodrome. The acute miasms, like the chronic, have their prodromal period. So here he clearly defines two important things. There are certain disorders which looks like acute, but they are not acute. The miasmatic background is always a chronic, either in the form of a sora as a non-venereal miasm, or either as a psychosis or syphilis as a non-venereal miasm. So these are two important varieties of chronic miasms which are there in the human being, and they are the products of certain things looking like a acute, but there is no period of prodrome. And if it is not a period of prodrome, they are not because of acute miasm, and they are not acutes. The background miasm is always a chronic. So here he clearly defines there are certain acute disorders which are developed because of acute miasms, and there are certain acute disorders which are the product of chronic miasms expressing as an acute. So this variety one must know. And then he turns towards the aphorism 72. 72 deals with two types of definitions. One is acute disease and second is chronic diseases. And acutes are classified again into four types of diseases. Already we have discussed about them in yesterday's lecture. They are individual or indisposition, sporadic caused because of environmental circumstances, changes. Soric, the third one, that is the epidemic, and fourth one is endemic. Out of which these first two are always because of some higher hypersusceptibility, and rest of the two depends upon the virulence of acute miasms. So what he says in paragraph number 72, relative to the first point, it will be necessary for us to enter into some general consideration. The diseases of man resolve themselves into two classes, etc. Remember that acute diseases always tend to recovery. The chronic diseases have no tendency whatsoever to the recovery, but a continuous progressive tendency. They are far deeper miasm. So one important difference which he defines over there, acutes are miasms which has a period of decline and they recover themselves. But in chronic, it is not possible. Chronic are always chronic and they ends with the life of the human being. There are three of these chronic miasms that belongs to the human family. Now he turns toward the chronics. Sora, syphilis, and psychosis. And these we will take up and study. The worst cases are those wherein three chronic miasms or some part of three have been complicated by drugs. What he is saying, when there is a chronic miasm already and when it is complicated with a allopathic drugging, those cases are most complicated cases. When when the effect of drug has been removed, then we may begin to study the pure miasms themselves. But the miasms are complicated at the present day in most men. For whenever we come in contact with chronic sickness, we come in contact also with chronic drugging and its effects on the vital force. And this is quite common in present era. Peoples are drugged since long time for their chronic complaint. If there is a case of hypertension comes, patient is long time taking the antihypertensive. If the patient is a diabetic, he used to be succumb to long-standing use of anti-diabetic. If rheumatoid arthritis is there, he is succumb to the anti-inflammatory or sometimes even to the steroids. I am of the opinion, perhaps I am wrong, that when bloodletting was in vogue, when violent cathartics were thrown in, when emetics and sweating were prescribed, as in the olden times, when all these violent things were resorted to, the human race was not torn to pieces as rapidly as the present day. What he is saying? It is very important. The human race was in a better condition than today because even though the bloodletting was the method, even though they used to produce vomitings, even though there was a method like producing a sweating over there, even though such types of methods are used, people were better than today because there was not so much of drugging which happens to be there. But now you see the prescriptions of the people and you see the old people, they are consuming the tablets as a food. There are a number of tablets they used to consume, and this is the problem with the old people and present era. The enormous doses of jalap and calomel rushed through the intestines and cleaned out the patient, and he felt better afterwards and probably did not carry to his grave the internal results of cleaning out. He did not carry the internal results of emetics and pseudorepics, but at the present day, small doses of concentrated drugs are administered, which have an insidious effects upon the economy and develop their chronic symptoms very slowly. Present day, people are taking lot of medicines. They are consuming many medicines at a time, and long continued use of it used to produce constitutional changes in the human being. From the continued taking of old school products, the alkaloids, etc., we have the most dreadful state that has ever occurred in the history of medicine coming on. And this is the problem of present era. People are suffering from more and more drugging. People are suffering not only with the common, simple chronic diseases, but people are suffering from the complex chronic diseases. Many people suffers from autoimmune disorders, and those autoimmune disorders are the products of drugging with the chronic miasms. The aim is to get small doses to get an insidious effect. The milder preparations like sulfonol require months to develop their chronic tendencies and are most vicious and troublesome drugs. These slow and subtle preparations are now being manufactured and though seeming to produce a mild primary effect, have secondary effects or after effects which are very severe. So people are taking many medicines. They are, even though they are in small doses, but they are continuously the peoples are taking. And because of which the peoples are getting gradual poisoning of all those drugs and they become dependent, habitual to the drugs. If they miss single dose of the drug, they feel restless. They start getting the symptoms again. And this is the problem of the present era. What Hahnemann said in his time, the most troublesome chronic diseases were those that had been complicated with the drugs. And this is the present problem. If that were true, then it is 10 times more so now. And this book was written in around 1900. Now it is 2026. If Kent says like that, then we must say it is 100 times more so now. And this is the truth. People are suffering with very, very, very complex diseases. Many new names are given to the diseases. And these are nothing but the complexes which arises because of allopathic drugging with chronic miasms. The little headaches, compounds, the catarrh cures, etc., are milder as to the first effects, but more violent as to the last effects. They are prepared to imitate the palpable form of homeopathic remedy. So, this is the present era where we are observing many sufferings complicated with allopathic drug. So, in this chapter, he started explaining about the chronic diseases in the last part. And from next chapter, he starts directly with the causes of chronic disease in the form of psora, syphilis, and psychosis, the three miasms. Kant's explanation of those miasms is the wonderful understanding of miasms. And that we have to learn. The Hahnemannian concept of understanding the miasm was superficial. Hahnemann's understanding of miasm was just a separation theory. Kant's understanding of miasm is a deeper understanding of the concept of miasm. So on Monday onwards, we'll start with next chapter and we'll learn both the aspects. In first chapter, he defines Hahnemannian concept, and in next chapter, he explains his own concept regarding the Sora. So we have to go with Kant's philosophy and understand how he understands the miasm and explains it in a better way. So that's all for today. Thank you being there, and we'll meet again on Monday. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good